Welcome back to the deep dive, where we really get into the thick of complex human choices.
Great to be back.
Okay, so let's just dive right in. We're looking at a situation where trust is completely broken. I mean, shattered. Does that mean marriage vows, for better or worse, sickness and health, do they still, bind you, especially when the person who broke everything needs help later on?
That's a heavy question right out of the gate. It really captures the core tension, doesn't it? That conflict between what we promise, maybe idealism, and the messy reality of deep hurt and self-protection. It's rarely straightforward.
Exactly. And for this deep dive, we're working from a really specific and I think powerful source. It's a YouTube transcript from Reddit Stories Life Choices, and the title says it all. My dad cheated. I told him his affair broke our family. AIT.
AIT, am I the asshole? Classic
Yeah.
Reddit framing for these kinds of moral dilemmas.
Right. So our mission here is to unpack what this story tells us about the lasting damage of betrayal, how that clashes with feelings of obligation, and how communities, even online ones, wrestle with these tough calls.
And what's interesting about this source, even though it's one family story, is how it uses that specific situation to explore these much bigger ethical questions. It even touches on hypotheticals, like vows in sickness and health, to kind of frame the real-life choices being made. He gives us a broader lens.
Okay, so let's frame that opening question again, really zero in on it. We're looking at a story that makes us ask, when trust is just obliterated by betrayal, do those marriage vows, for better or worse, in sickness and in health, still carry the same weight? Especially when the person who did the betraying later needs support or, expects forgiveness.
It really hits you, doesn't it? The rawness of it, the morality is just so tangled. You've got the pain, the very real need to protect yourself, but also maybe societal pressure or even internal guilt about those vows. The answers, like we said, they're just not simple.
So, to really get a grip on this, let's lay out the context. The narrator's life completely changed, just turned upside down when they were only 7. Their parents split because the dad had been cheating on the mom for 5 years.
5 years. That's a long time to live a double life.
Right. And it wasn't just any affair, it was with someone the mom thought was a close friend. The source calls it a double betrayal.
Oh, that's brutal.
Yeah.
Because it attacks trust on two fronts, the spouse and the friend.
Exactly. It hurt her twice as much, the source says, left a much deeper wound. It wasn't just promises broken by a husband. It was a friend who twisted the knife, made her feel like her safe space, her friendship circle was all a lie, just decimated her sense of security.
And the timing. The timing is just horrific, isn't it?
It's almost hard to believe. The affair started right after the mom nearly died during a really dangerous pregnancy. They lost the baby.
Oh, no.
And she lost the ability to have any more kids. The source paints this picture of her in the hospital, grieving, needing support from her husband and friend.
Who should have been there for her?
Right. But instead, they were meeting behind her back, building a new life, a new family on top of her pain. The source calls it a planned meanness. It's chilling. It suggests it wasn't just impulsive, but calculated.
Building a new life while the old one was literally bleeding out.
Yeah.
That kind of betrayal leaves scars.
Yeah.
Yeah, words probably can't cover it.
And the way it all came out, just as devastating. It exploded into our lives at the narrator's birthday party. They were 7, maybe delayed party, but still. The dad lied, said he had to go to a funeral for an old friend.
Another lie.
But the truth was much worse, much more sneaky. He was actually with the affair partner at an ultrasound for their baby.
Wow. At an ultrasound while his other child is having a birthday party.
Yeah. The mom found out. Everything just collapsed. The narrator says their happy childhood was suddenly ruined by the sad truth of adult betrayal. They even say they'll always link that memory to balloons and cake.
That image. Balloons and cake mixed with that kind of devastating discovery. That sticks with you. It perfectly captures how innocence gets shattered.
So, after all that, the father marries the affair partner. They have 6 kids together. A whole new family built where our family used to be, as the narrator puts it.
A constant, visible reminder.
Yeah, and the mother. The source says she showed a strong spirit, but she never truly got over what they did to her. She chose to protect herself, kept her distance, made her rules clear, chose her own peace over pretending everyone was happy.
Smart, setting boundaries early on.
Which definitely shaped the narrator's childhood, made them careful in their own relationships, always kind of looking out for hidden problems.
Understandable. That experience would absolutely rewire how you see trust.
Okay, so fast forward years later, and the father starts making these, well, frankly, audacious requests. During the pandemic, a global crisis, he calls the mother, completely out of nowhere, and asks if his 6 kids, the narrator's half-siblings from the affair, can come live in her house.
Wait, live in the first wife's house, the one he
Nah.
betrayed.
Yep. His reasoning was that he and his new wife worked in hospitals. The mother was, understandably, totally shocked. Her answer, no way.
I can't even imagine the nerve. It's not just asking for help. It's asking the person you devastated to take on the consequences, the literal children of that devastation. That's a staggering level of entitlement, a belief that his past actions had zero lasting emotional debt.
And it didn't stop there. Leading up to the narrator's high school graduation, the dad's having money trouble, quit jobs, can't pay for a party, fine. But he still expects to be welcomed with open arms at the party the mother is throwing.
So he contributes nothing but expects full inclusion.
Worse, he complained out loud, tried to put all the blame on my mom, claiming it was his right to be there, to celebrate.
Unbelievable. It's like he genuinely believed the original vows still granted him rights within the family structure he destroyed, completely ignoring the massive betrayal and hurt he caused. He expected her to just absorb it all.
And he tried to manipulate the narrator during this too, right? Tried to make the mother look like the bad guy.
Yes, trying to paint her as stubborn, the one who stopped our family from being together, putting the narrator right in the middle, forcing them to choose sides or feel guilty.
Which connects to that bigger picture you mentioned earlier.
Exactly. The source brings up this idea, almost a thought experiment, about a hypothetical Jane with a serious health problem, and how leaving a husband or wife at such a time feels wrong to many people.
Even after betrayal.
That's the dilemma it highlights. Even though this story isn't about the betrayer being sick, the source uses that common feeling, that societal pressure, to show how strong the expectation can be to uphold vows or at least provide support even when you've been deeply, deeply hurt. It pits that perceived duty against the need for personal healing.
Okay, let's really dig into the core conflicts here, the key dilemmas. The first one is huge. Those vows, for better or worse, sickness and health, versus the reality of trust being completely broken by cheating. Can those vows realistically stand after that?
That's the absolute crux of it, isn't it? How can a commitment, especially one so profound, survive when the bedrock it was built on, trust, respect, fidelity, has been pulverized? A vow isn't just words. It's like a contract based on shared understanding and mutual respect. When one person fundamentally violates that.
Does the contract still hold?
Exactly. Does the non-breaching party still owe adherence to terms the other person completely disregarded? It feels like the spirit of the vow itself becomes a kind of cruel joke in that context.
Which leads straight into the next dilemma. Emotional support versus self-preservation. The mom being asked to house the affair kids, the narrator holding in years of anger. It's about the emotional cost.
Absolutely. Yeah. It highlights that fundamental need to protect your mind and feelings after such a big break of trust. Can you actually offer comfort or even just occupy the same emotional space without re-injuring yourself, without ripping open wounds that have maybe barely scarred over?
It seems like an impossible ask sometimes.
It often is. Expecting someone who's been betrayed to provide emotional labor, especially when the betrayer shows no real remorse, can be incredibly re-traumatizing. It's asking them to be vulnerable in a way they just can't or shouldn't have to be.
And the father expecting everyone to just act like nothing happened, for the narrator not have taken sides. That brings up obligation versus authenticity. The source asks, basically, do you have to prioritize the betrayer's comfort over your own emotional truth?
Yeah, that's what I call the authenticity test. Do you perform forgiveness or accommodation because you feel you should or because society expects it? Or do you honor your genuine feelings, even if they're painful or uncomfortable for others?
Is pretending kindness?
That's the question. Or does fake loyalty just perpetuate the harm, denying the reality of the betrayal, the narrator wanting things to be real? That's a powerful expression of needing authenticity over pretense. Honoring your own truth is, I think, vital for psychological health.
And the impact on the kids, that's another huge dilemma. The narrator's childhood suddenly ruined, the link to balloons and cake, and then the dad asking the mom to take in his other 6 kids. It just shows how the ripples spread, doesn't it?
Oh, massively. A parent's betrayal fundamentally shapes a child's worldview. Their understanding of trust, family, relationships, it's all impacted. The narrator becoming careful, always worried about hidden problems. That's a direct consequence.
It affects their future relationships.
Definitely. And the welfare of all the kids involved gets tangled up. Asking the first wife to take responsibility for the children born from the affair. That's not just audacious, it's putting another layer of burden onto the original child, the narrator, who's already navigating this incredibly complex family dynamic.
And finally, community or social judgment. The dad trying to make the mom look like the bad guy, pushing the narrator to get over it after 10 years.
Yeah, that taps into those broader societal pressures we talked about. The expectation to forgive, reconcile, move on, often on an arbitrary timeline. People who hold boundaries after betrayal can be judged as bitter or unforgiving.
Making it even harder to heal.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It can be incredibly isolating when you feel judged for not performing a happy family narrative that just isn't real. The father was clearly trying to manipulate that social pressure to his advantage.
So let's shift to the psychology here. The source says this wasn't just a breakup, it was a quiet earthquake, leaving a much deeper wound. Are we talking actual trauma?
I think in this case, yes, absolutely. This goes beyond just her feelings. The double betrayal, spouse and friend, creates a complex trauma. It violates your safe space, makes your reality feel like a lie. It's a profound breach of trust that can lead to things like hypervigilance, difficulty trusting anyone, deep grief, a sense of moral injury even.
Especially with that timing,
Yeah.
after the pregnancy loss.
Yeah. That specific context elevates it. It's not just infidelity, it's betrayal during a period of intense vulnerability and grief. The source says it caused a huge shattering of how she saw the world, left a lasting mark on her heart. It fundamentally reshaped her approach to safety and relationships.
And for the narrator, linking it to balloons and cake.
That image is so potent. It shows how trauma gets encoded, especially in childhood. Innocence and devastating betrayal become fused. That caution they feel in relationships later, that's the psychological imprint of that early experience. It embeds deeply.
And deep wounds like that leave triggers, right? Later interactions can just bring it all flooding back.
That's a hallmark of trauma. For the mother, the father's later requests, housing the kids, attending the party, aren't just awkward moments. They're likely powerful triggers, forcing her to relive the original pain and fear. It's emotionally exhausting.
The source mentions emotional exhaustion from being hurt again and again.
Exactly. Her need for her own peace isn't just preference, it's psychological necessity. She needs to conserve her emotional energy. And the narrator not being able to support the dad, the source calls that a sign of their own pain that hasn't gone away. They're emotionally depleted themselves.
Which brings us to that idea of forced intimacy. The dad wanting everyone to act like nothing happened so he could be the good guy. Why is that pressure so damaging?
Because it's fundamentally invalidating. It forces the betrayed person to perform a role that denies their reality, their pain. Pretending to be a happy family, which the mom refused to do, is a form of emotional labor that benefits the betrayer while harming the betrayed.
It's like gaslighting almost, making them question their own feelings.
In a way, yes. It attempts to rewrite the history and suggests their legitimate feelings are wrong or disproportionate. This constant denial erodes self-trust and keeps the trauma alive. The narrator holding in anger for years. That's the cost of suppressing authentic feelings for a false peace.
As the source says, real support can't be forced.
Precisely. Trying to compel closeness or support when the foundation is broken doesn't heal anything. It just perpetuates the harm, prevents genuine resolution, and constantly reminds the betrayed that their pain isn't seen or validated.
Okay, let's pivot to the ethics. This is huge here. One way to look at it is deontological, focusing on absolute duties. How does that apply?
Right, so deontology says certain duties or rules are absolute. Marriage vows, for better or worse, sickness and health, could be seen as such a duty. From this perspective, the promise itself is binding, regardless of what happens later.
Like the source noting that leaving a spouse when they're sick feels wrong to many people.
Exactly. That feeling often comes from a deontological place. The vow creates an obligation that transcends circumstances, even betrayal. We see it in the father's attitude. He seemed to feel entitled to inclusion, to support, almost as if the vows gave him a permanent right, despite his actions.
But what are the limits there? Does the duty hold even if the other person completely destroyed the basis for it?
That's the challenge for pure deontology here. It struggles when duties conflict. What about the duty to protect yourself or your children from harm caused by the vow breaker? Can a duty truly remain binding when the trust it was built on is gone? It can feel rigid, maybe not fully capturing the human reality of betrayal.
So what's the alternative ethical lens? Utilitarianism.
Utilitarianism looks at outcomes, the greatest good for the greatest number, minimizing overall harm. So it would weigh the well-being of everyone involved, especially the kids.
The mother choosing her own peace over pretending, Seems to fit that, right? Minimizing her own ongoing suffering.
It does align with that, yes. And considering the narrator's childhood being ruined and their future relationship caution that shows the long-term harm the father's actions caused, a utilitarian would ask, what actually leads to less suffering overall?
Maintaining a fake unity or stepping away for real healing.
That's the question. Is the abstract good of keeping a family structure intact worth the very real suffering of the betrayed individuals? The difficulty is always how you measure good and harm in these deeply personal situations. Can one person's pain be justified for a supposed greater good? That gets ethically murky fast.
Which brings us back to authenticity. The source talks about the hurt of lying deeply. How does being true to yourself fit into the ethics?
I think that authenticity test is key. Is it ethical to demand someone perform loyalty or closeness they don't genuinely feel? The source says real support can't be forced. Forcing it asks the betrayed person to violate their own truth, their integrity.
So the narrator's outburst, "Dad, it's because of your affair, not Mom," that was ethically significant.
I'd argue yes. It was a demand for honesty, a refusal to participate in the father's false narrative where he was the victim. It was painful, sure, but it asserted authenticity over pretense. A truly ethical approach here might require that kind of painful honesty about the wounds, rather than a superficial performance that only protects the betrayer and prolongs the pain. It's about aligning actions with your actual experienced truth.
So, given all this complexity, what actual alternatives did the family find, besides just suffering or pretending?
Well, the clearest alternative was the mother establishing firm boundaries for limited interaction. She made her rules clear, stayed away, chose her own peace. That wasn't passive, it was an active strategy.
Defining who was welcome, minimizing contact.
Likely yes, creating a safe emotional space.
Yeah.
And the narrator confronting the father, leading to him not being at the party. That was the enforcement of those boundaries. It was a way to manage the dynamic, however painfully, prioritizing the well-being of those who were betrayed. It was, as the source said, someone finally standing up for the pain she had silently carried.
What about things like co-parenting or shared responsibilities? How did that play out after the breach?
True co-parenting seems unlikely, given the circumstances. But we saw the father try to impose a shared responsibility, housing his other kids. The mother's flat refusal was crucial. She established a boundary. I am not responsible for the consequences of your choices that destroyed our family.
But she didn't tell the narrator to cut off the dad entirely.
No, and that's nuanced. She said she loved the narrator, wanted them happy, never told them to stay away from their dad or half-siblings. But she was also clear she would never play happy families. That allowed the narrator to navigate their own relationship without being forced into the parents' broken dynamic. It separated her parental love from any lingering marital obligation.
When the immediate family is so broken, where does support come from?
That's where third parties and external family become vital. The narrator's graduation party is a perfect example. It was at the mom's house, full of mom's family and friends, people who truly celebrated my achievements without the shadow of old betrayals.
A safe harbor.
Exactly. People who offer validation, love, and belonging without conditions. They affirm your reality when the betrayer denies it. And later, the Reddit community's judgment also served as a kind of third-party validation, helping the narrator process their choices.
Okay, so let's talk about that community verdict. How did Reddit judge this? Was the narrator the asshole for confronting the dad?
Overwhelmingly, no. The verdict was NTA, not the asshole. The source says the community mostly agreed with the second idea, that personal boundaries and the right to heal after betrayal are paramount.
They sided with the narrator and, by extension, the mother's stance.
Absolutely. It was a strong validation of their pain and their right to protect themselves from further hurt, even if that meant confronting the father or refusing his demands.
And what was the reasoning? Why did they land so firmly on NTA?
It came down to understanding the psychological impact and the ethics of self-preservation. The community felt the narrator had the right to protect their mind and feelings after such a big break of trust. They got that you can't just switch emotions on and off.
They understood that real support can't be forced.
Exactly. They grasped that expecting emotional support from someone who is already emotionally broken is unrealistic and unfair. The verdict basically said, guilt doesn't override your need to protect yourself. Sometimes stepping away or pushing back, like the narrator did, is the kindest thing you can do for yourself.
And maybe even for the betrayer in the long run, forces them to face consequences?
Potentially, yes. It stops the cycle of enabling. The community really affirmed that deep betrayal changes everything, and the right to heal and set boundaries takes precedence over some unearned expectation of loyalty. It validated that idea that a promise broken so badly really can change love and duty forever.
It sounds like they recognize that the moral scales just fundamentally shift after something like this.
I think that's a good way to put it. The community acknowledged that while vows are important, their binding power isn't infinite. It can be shattered by actions that destroy the very foundation of the relationship, especially where there's no accountability or remorse shown afterwards. Expecting unwavering loyalty then becomes unreasonable.
So as we wrap up this really intense deep dive, what are the key takeaways, the big lessons from this story?
I think the first big one is that practical help is not the same as emotional closeness. The mother refusing to house the kids, that wasn't necessarily about refusing all help forever, but about refusing the emotional intimacy and responsibility that specific request implied. You can offer assistance, maybe, without offering your heart or your home in a way that reopens wounds.
That distinction feels critical.
It is. And sometimes, like the source hints, stepping away is the healthiest option, recognizing that practical help doesn't magically fix broken trust.
And the second lesson, thinking about the narrator's confrontation.
That leads to lesson 2. Honesty is better than fake loyalty. The mother choosing her own peace over pretending, the narrator demanding things be real, they both rejected the performance. Performing loyalty when it's not genuine just prolongs the pain and denies the truth. Authentic connection, if it's even possible after such betrayal, has to start with acknowledging the reality, however harsh.
Living in that falsehood just continues the damage.
Just like
Okay, and the source mentioned that hard balance between being kind and protecting yourself. What about boundaries?
lesson 3. Boundaries are self-protection, not cruelty. The mother's rules, the narrator's outburst, these weren't acts of malice. They were necessary acts of preserving their own well-being, drawing lines to prevent more harm.
And the community agreed.
Yes, the NTA verdict validated their right to protect their mind and feelings. Setting boundaries is self-care, it's self-respect, especially after trauma. It's not about punishing the other person, it's about safeguarding yourself.
And finally, the kids caught in the middle.
The last and maybe most crucial lesson. Children's well-being must stay the top priority. The narrator's childhood being suddenly ruined, the lasting impact on their trust, it's a stark reminder.
Yeah.
Parental choices, especially betrayals, have profound, long-lasting effects. Protecting a child's safety, their reality, their emotional integrity, even if it involves difficult truths, has to be central because those consequences echo for years, for generations even.
So what does all this mean for you, listening right now? This story, like so many we explore, really makes you grapple with duty, forgiveness, self-preservation. It shows how choices, especially those that shatter trust, have these deep, lasting consequences.
And it leaves us wrestling with that core question. Should vows, those promises of better or worse, sickness and health, really outweigh your fundamental right to protect yourself, to set boundaries, after a betrayal that devastates your life?
It's an incredibly difficult question. We really want to hear your thoughts. How do you weigh duty against healing, loyalty against authenticity? Head over to our socials, our website, and share your perspective. What stood out to you from this deep dive? Join the conversation.